right, it is 10 o'clock, so I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Right, technical difficulty. In the courtroom, we have Commissioner Wilkins, and of course, me, Commissioner Shannon is joining us via Zoom, so we Quorum. And we'll go ahead and start with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, 2.0 is additions and revisions to the agenda.
Have anything?
Pat, have anything?
Yeah, just a quick thing, and I can talk about announcements too, if that's better. But I was on an EOAC meeting the other day, and the dues hadn't been paid. I talked to Nathan this morning, didn't know anything about it. I'm not sure what that process is, but do we need to talk about that or just discuss it in announcements and follow up, or what do you want to do with that?
We can either put it under new business if you want to, or you can do announcements. I think either works fine. Do you have a preference?
It doesn't matter to me, whatever you think.
Okay, well, let's just add it under 6.6. Eastern Oregon dues. Okay, anything else? All right, if not, let's go into correspondence and public comment. We'll start with public comment. Individuals wishing to address the county court may do so at this time and at other times throughout the meeting. Speakers are asked to raise your hand to be recognized by the chair, give your name and address, and limit comments to 3 minutes. For those who are signing in via Zoom, it is *6 to unmute yourself, or if you're in on the Zoom platform, you know where it is. It's in the lower left-hand corner. And then I also always remind folks that we
Oh, no, it's on.
Can you hear us, Pat? You're muted, Pat.
Yeah, now I can. You went away for a minute.
Okay. Yeah, somehow we got muted there. What I was just saying, I don't know where I got cut off, but we're on the public comment portion. What I was saying to folks is we are very informal. And so as we move through the agenda, if there's things that folks want to ask questions or interject on, we welcome that. So with that, I will ask if there is any public comment to start with. And I see Chris Jackson has his hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, this is concerning the homestead rebate. And after reviewing everything, I really functionality have not a leg to stand on for the 2 filings that I just made yesterday. All I can say is that we've had a very unusual last year, and compounded with that is that on October 13th, I was rear-ended up in Umatilla, and so I was heavily sedated there for a while. But I'm back on normal now. I've submitted all the paperwork to get my homestead rebate enact, get moving, and I'm just hoping that the commission can find some way to get some money back to me.
Okay. Do we have Chet here?
He's on. Jamie's on.
Or Jamie's on?
I was gonna say he's on call.
Commissioners, so just to be clear, the issue is, right, the filing didn't get in on time. Is that, Jamie, is that what Chet's determination was? Maybe.
I talked to Chet this morning, and that's what he communicated to me.
I filed it yesterday, so I guess
Okay.
that would be a truism.
So it sounds like that will be something then, unless I'm mistaken, commissioners, that you'll just be in for next year. It sounds commissioners have a different take on that.
No, I think that's what we have in our economic enhancement ordinance, and we have to follow it.
Okay. Any other public comment? Okay, if not, let's move into correspondence. I would just note for the record that we have received a final report for a special projects grant from North Gilliam County Health District. I won't obviously read it, but for those who are interested in seeing it, all of the correspondence is always included as part of the court packet, which is on the county's website. So anybody who wants to go in and see how those funds were expended, that's where you can go. And this is sort of our accountability measure that we have, so the public can see how their money is being invested in the county. Let's see. I think that's all I've got for that. Consent agenda.
Do you have any questions on the consent agenda, Commissioner Shannon?
No, I do not.
Either. I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
And moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda, which consists of consider approval of September 15th, 2021 regular meeting minutes, consider approval of Gilliam County Transportation Policy Handbook 2021 edition, consider approval of Motorola Solutions quote and purchase for DigiTicket service, consider approval of services agreement with Community Action Program of East Central Oregon, or CAPECO, for senior nutrition program, and consider approval of amendment number 1 with community counseling for services provided to individuals under the jurisdiction of the Psychiatric Security Review Board. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let me just catch up here. So 5.1 is discussion regarding the elected officials salary survey. And if you guys remember, I think our last meeting, I had mentioned that when the Gilliam County Compensation Board met in the springtime, that they had discussed wanting a salary survey to be conducted of the elected officials' compensation levels, so that sort of in preparation for their work for fiscal year 2022-2023, so next year. And so I asked the compensation board members if they would be willing to come by, and I see there's some online, and Nicole Scott's here. It looks like Sue's on. Denny, are you on?
Yes.
Denny's on. I think what we were looking for from you all is just a little bit more information on what you're hoping to get out of the survey. And then based on that, we'll form a game plan. So I don't know, Denny, if did you want to start maybe and share thoughts, or Sue?
Sue's the chair.
Yeah, but I'll defer to you, Denny. I think you were the one that was had originally requested this, so why don't you go forward?
Okay. Let me just preface it by saying, with the exception of Union, Baker, Wallowa, and Malheur counties, I've worked with all the counties and county officials throughout Central and Eastern Oregon, and I can tell you that while we may do things similarly, nobody does the same. So I think our interest is in trying to find out where we have in our county commonality in other counties, so that we are comparing, as it were, apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and not differently. And just as an example of how things are different county to county, when I was working here in Oregon, I did UCC filings in virtually every county that, other than those 4 in far eastern Oregon. And I can tell you that sometimes those filings were with the clerk, sometimes the treasurer, sometimes community development, and sometimes the county recorder, whoever that might be. So, so that's just an example of how we don't necessarily do the same things. What interests me is, and certainly the people who are professionals in this field know how to extract this information from your counterparts, county officials, from wherever we source information. But what interests me is the position, the annual salary before deductions, to include deferred comp, an individual's years in the position, the hours worked per week or month, whichever the case may be, and the shift worked. Because I think we would recognize that somebody who works perhaps weekends or night shift or something like that might be compensated differently than somebody works the typical 9 to 5. And most important to me is the task that the individual performs. And not whether they do it well or not so well, because that's up to the voters. But I want to know the task they do. And I want to know the percent of time they spend on a task annually. Because we know some things are cyclical, budgets as an example, tax collection, whatever the case may be. So I want to know on the scheme of things annually how much time is spent on the various tasks. What I want to know is what they do, not what subordinates do, not what they are responsible for. And here's an example. I am head of household, so I'm responsible for the well-being of my family, their health, etc. But, and their health to include, as an example, diet and meals. But I don't cook. That is not my task. My task might be to hire or fire the cook, but cooking is not my task. You kind of see the difference in those?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's the information I would like to have collected. And as I say, the pros, they know how to go about doing that. Somebody you would contract would definitely know how to go about doing that. And I just want to be on record as saying I'm not opposed to recommending, and it would be a recommendation from the committee, I'm not opposed to recommending quantum increases or significant decreases. What I am opposed to is just doing things the way we've always done them because that's how we've always done them. If that was the case, we'd be communicating by smoke signal. That's my contribution.
So I'm clear, is the committee's request that it definitely be done by somebody outside? I mean, like we have a chief of staff that handles our comparisons for our other employees. Am I hearing you would prefer that it be a contracted out with somebody? Did I catch your meaning, Denny, when you said professionals?
I'm sorry to say you're breaking up, but it's probably the phone on my end. If you can hear me, what I think you're asking about is whether it be done in-house or outside, and I by far prefer it be done by a private contractor.
Okay.
Because here's my reasoning for that. What if, I'm not suggesting that it would happen, but what if it was recommended that some position be, valued differently, and as a consequence, that value be placed at a lower level. I don't want, and I wouldn't think you would want that to come back on one of our employees who provided the base information.
Got it. Hand up. You there, Sue?
Yeah, thank you. The one thing I would add to that, and thank you for that very comprehensive explanation. That was well done. The one thing I would maybe add to that is the number of personnel that salaried elected official manages.
Fully agree.
I'd like to add that what kind of special education or certifications experience is required to perform the position.
Yeah, I agree. I think anytime you can evaluate what services we're providing and where our tax dollars. For our hourly employees, we've reanalyzed what they're making, so there's no reason why we shouldn't do the same for our electeds. So, totally in support.
I am also, and I really appreciate the clarity of what you have presented to us too. Makes a lot of sense.
Great. So I think as next steps,
Can I add one?
oh, go ahead.
Real quick. I think if the experts that you hire think that there are other aspects that we should look at besides what we listed, then I would recommend we listen to those experts.
Okay. Okay. So what I'm thinking in terms of next steps, commissioners and board, is that Lisa and I go out and find those quote unquote pros and bring a couple of options back to the court and to make a hiring decision, a contracting decision, and then get them started ASAP with the hope that maybe we could have a finished product by maybe
Next spring. Yeah, next spring anyway, huh?
Gary.
I maybe heard Denny incorrectly, but I think in accordance with what tasks we perform as elected officials, regardless of what tasks happen in our office, it is responsibility of that elected official in the end. So I don't think it depends on, I perform less tasks than my deputies, but if they screw that up, it's on me. So I think that may be something I would disagree with as far as analyzing.
Take that into consideration.
I agree with Gary.
Nathan.
All right, having sat through a bunch of compensation board stuff, the only other thing I think is it would be instructive. I mean, the collective bargaining agreement's already been negotiated, but it would be instructive if maybe this was on a recurring basis, say every 6 years to be completed before the negotiation collective bargaining agreement. So we have some sort of basis, you know, going forward for all the compensation for everybody, because you can see where maybe you might feel like we're shooting in the dark. It's really what we're trying to avoid. And I don't think it would be too much to ask, but maybe, I don't know what the cost is going to be, but.
Just the other thing is some elected officials by state statute are required to perform certain duties. There are others that are, say for instance, parole and probation is under the county court, but that doesn't mean that the county court performs that task. It's been assigned to another elected official, being me. So, I mean, there's, you know, a broad scope of things to consider, and as a contractual person, they may not capture that.
Yeah, I think the challenge, and I think that the board knows this because Denny alluded to it as well, but the saying whenever we're at AOC meetings is if you've seen one Oregon County, you've seen one Oregon County. And so comparisons are going to be very challenging, I think, because I think we have the only clerk in the state that runs payroll, for instance. So I don't know that you're ever going to be able to really get an apples to apples for all of our electeds, but we'll definitely charge this person with getting as best as we can. So with that, anything else on that? And I will have some follow-up once I get some names and quotes from some pros.
Sounds good.
Pat, anything more on that?
No, sounds like a good plan.
Okay. Thank you, Compensation Board, since we have you, for your time and volunteering, not only here today, but annually. So we appreciate it. Okay, let's go on to 5.2, which is review public health feasibility study and discussion regarding next steps. So if you guys want to come up to the table, and while Holly and Daleen are coming up, I will set the stage. Back in March of 2021, the county court approved funding a public health feasibility study. The purpose of this was to basically explore the feasibility of bringing public health back to Gilliam County from North Central Public Health District. Then last week, we had what I thought was a fantastic work session in Arlington. Lots of good input, lots of public participation, sort of highlighting the initial findings, and then starting that conversation with the public on questions, concerns, all that kind of stuff. So the purpose of today's discussion is actually to receive the final study, which again, for the public, that will be online and available if you want to read the whole thing. Daleen and Holly are not going to read it line by line today. So if you want to spend, it's fascinating reading. So if you want to spend your evening doing that, is on the county's website. And
Yeah, if you have any interest at all, it is a very, very good read. So go for it.
It's definitely, in terms of, it's an area that I think most of the public has no idea what it actually is. And so I thought that it did a good job of sort of laying out those nuts and bolts of what public health even is. So, so with that, I am going to turn this over to Daleen Wilson and Holly Winslow, and they are going to actually give us some sort of high level overview kinds of things, and then we'll have questions. So with that, take it away, ladies.
All this comes up. This is very new for me. I have no idea what I'm doing.
We're very techie around here now.
I'm so glad we have people here to help me with this.
Some of us are
lost.
Yeah.
You just click through your slides like normal as you.
Here or up here? Up here. Okay.
Perfect.
All right.
I'm not
Here,
the only one.
here we go. See, it's my turn this time, Teresa. Not yours. It's all right. Happy to take it on. So yeah. The whole study, you have the whole shebang now. It's in your hands. You've had the ability to read it. It's kind of been our baby for the past 6 months, and we're excited to finally be at this point and give you all the details that we've been able to come up with. So I wanted to start off, here we go, is just a little recap from last week. Like you mentioned, we gave a very broad overview, if you will, to everybody of what public health entails, and going through, state levels, local levels, the different programs that are out there, funding. So I just, I know you hear a lot of information. At one time, just wanted to see if there were any questions off of that last week that maybe you walked away with. And, after the fact, you're like, oh, I wish I would have asked that, or, anything regarding that meeting that we wanted to go over first.
I think any questions or you know, that I had or was a little foggy on, your study was really filled in some of my gaps.
Perfect.
Pat, any questions or follow-up from the work session?
Not necessarily from the work session, a few on the feasibility study, so maybe proceed and we'll go from there.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, and so this again goes with the work session. That was one of those things that I didn't get into as the mandatory programs. I just kind of listed them out for everybody of what that entailed and what there was to cover. So that is all in the report. But I just thought I'd include that real quickly too, to see if there were any questions on those programs and mandatory responsibilities.
No, I thought the report laid that out
Okay,
pretty well.
perfect. All right, so we're just going to turn over to now to hopefully Gilliam County local public health and what that looks like for us here, and what that's really, you know, what the feasibility study was all about is how can we bring this to Gilliam County? What's that going to look like? What's that going to entail for us? So we've just got a lot of different ideas and numbers to throw at you. And I guess as we go through this, if anybody has questions regarding, you know, what we're specifically talking about, we can do it then if you would prefer, or if we want to wait till afterwards, we can do it afterwards
Okay.
too. So
I think commissioners, you can interject as we go through if you would like, and then public, if we can kind of, just because it's hard for me to see you all, if we can kind of wait until the end for the public, I think that might help me manage.
Okay. So just to quickly go over the points, why is it time for Gilliam County to start our own public health? And we heard a lot about this last week, is that Gilliam County deserves better services than we're currently being provided. There's a lot of opportunity out there to grow and take advantage of, and we're not seeing it at this point, and we feel like we should be. The other point, we will be able to have direct sight into our community and the needs that are there, and be able to have local control where we don't have that right now. We can improve our accessibility to services for our community. We won't have to drive as far, like going to the Dalles and the clinic there. We get to create jobs for our county, and we get to keep Gilliam County money in Gilliam County by bringing it back to Gilliam County. We can better utilize the agencies that we have in our county right now to coordinate public health and bring a more holistic approach on what we want to see. We've got really great local resources right now already, as we've seen them pull together with COVID. We're capable. We can pull together and be more efficient and effective to provide services. We've got a community now that wants to take it on, which we did not have 12 years ago when this all came about. But we do have people that are ready and willing to get involved and do it. And so we also believe that Gilliam County is capable of doing this at no additional costs than what we're currently giving to North Central on our behalf. So we see place of operation. Where are we going to hold this? Where are we going to put it? And we have looked at options, and we're seeing the South Gilliam Health Center is probably the best option. They have staff there right now that are already providing those essential services, and can continue to do so. Sharing staff between the South Gilliam Health Center and the local public health authority just makes better economical sense. Instead of having two separate entities, you can kind of pull them together and use the staffing of both to help with costs. And because they'll be tied so closely together with those clinical services, we kind of feel like that using the same building so that communication between both is far easier. You want to add there, Holly? Jump in at any time. Staffing needs, we went over this briefly last week, but at a minimum, you have to have a health officer and you have to have an administrator. The current medical director for the South Gilliam Health Center or Health District is Dr. James Edwards. Holly has had a conversation with him already. He has agreed to take on this role if this is what comes about. He is also the health officer for Wheeler County Public Health. And so he could really come into that role for Gilliam County with some really good knowledge and direction. The administrator would be a new hired position, something that we would have to create a job description for, but there are Oregon revised statutes and Oregon administrative rules that are set out that we will have to follow those guidelines of. And looking at the whole thing, we kind of see this role, at least, it will have a transition period, and I'll get to that here shortly. But we see that role is starting off as part-time as we do that transition period. And then it would be a full-time job once the local public health authority, takes off and is active, at least in the state size too, in July. And that's when the new fiscal year starts. Other staffing needs are physician's assistants that we already have at South Gilliam Health Clinic. They can provide those necessary clinical services that are needed to run public health. There are a lot of services in there: immunizations, reproductive health. There's a lot of different things that float under the clinical services, but the physician's assistants that are already currently there, we've talked to them a whole bunch. They're very involved in all of this. They're very willing to be a part of this and a part of any other programs that they feel like that they can be helpful in, not just in the clinical services. We're also estimating that about 15 to 20% of their time and their work would be directed towards public health services, and the rest of it would stay with the clinic. And it's a matter of sorting those out, timing those out, and keeping track of times when they're doing clinical services and when they're doing public health services. And then we added a fiscal officer, somebody that specializes in the budgets and the numbers. The state requires certain reporting of the numbers and how you're spending your money and where the money from the different programs are coming from. And so somebody to help us keep that on track and help with the reporting to the state. Contract services. So there are a few programs out there that are going to be harder to do ourselves. And that big one, again, we talked about that last week, is the environmental health. There just aren't a lot of environmental health specialists out there. And so we have talked to Umatilla County and Grant County specifically on what that looks like, and if this comes about, if they would be willing to provide some contract services for us. Umatilla County it has been really a great resource for us. Any questions that I have, he's been really great at getting back to me quickly. So their director, the director for the Umatilla County Public Health is also the environmental health specialist. So he's providing two roles there, and then he trains other people. So they really have a great environmental health staff on hand. They also contract out with, we've got Morrow County, Umatilla, Morrow, and there was another one in there.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it was.
They've got it well under control. Grant County has been a really great resource for us too. They've got a gentleman over there. He's got a lot of knowledge. He started off as an RN and then worked himself into environmental health. But they also provide the environmental health for Wheeler County. So that could be a good resource. It's just a matter of going through each of them and deciding it's best.
So I think some of the initial feedback when people hear contract services, they think, is this a huge amount of money? So I wonder if maybe you could speak to, like, for those other counties that are contracting with these two entities, what what does the fee schedule look like? Is there like a base fee? Do they take just the permits? Is it a combination? Maybe speak to that a little bit, because I think that's something that I've gotten from the public saying, you're going to contract it out, and how are they going to have enough money left here to actually provide the service? So that might be helpful to.
It varies from county to county. So Umatilla County charges a base fee for providing those services, and that helps, I think, cover their costs in travel back and forth. And then they also collect the fees from doing the inspections and whatnot. Grant County, they just collect the fees. They don't charge a baseline fee to do it. They just collect whatever fees that they do from doing the inspections and whatnot. So it's different from each. We do have the numbers for Umatilla County. So we got the numbers for what they charge Morrow County. And I don't know, do we give specific numbers on? I don't know.
Well, I can go over a little bit more on the budget too, how I came up with my number.
What they charge Morrow County, at least what Umatilla charges Morrow County, were about the inspections that they would have to do and the workload that they would have to do in Gilliam County is about the third of what they would do in Morrow County. And so we just kind of adjusted budgeting with that. I mean, worst case scenario, yeah, we are charged a bottom line fee plus they take the fees of that. But we use that based off of Morrow County and what that bottom line looks like. There's always the option. North Central is already doing our environmental health and doing our inspections. So I see no reason why we couldn't contract back with North Central too. And that just requires, of course, a conversation if that would be something that they're interested in.
I do like because I remember when we were talking about building codes, originally Wasco County was looking at maybe providing it here, and they were going to charge for mileage per trip and all. I kind of like the idea that there's just a base fee, so you know exactly how much it's going to cost, and then any fees that they collect are theirs. So I think that makes a lot of, from a budget standpoint,
Much easier
to
for sure.
to anticipate. So anyway, continue.
Hey, I have a question on the difference in the fees on different entities that are performing that on a contract basis. You confuse me a little, Daylene, on some counties are charging an extra fee to do those services to the entity that needs the services required to have the service done. That would be over and the top licensing fees. Is that what you said some of them are doing?
No, so the county would charge the public health authority a base fee. So that would be reflected in our budget, and then they collect the fees from doing the inspection. So they're not charging the entity.
So what are the fees for doing the inspection? The county would pay that, you said, or the entity would, the business or the
business pay?
Because that's not happening now is why I'm asking the question.
I think it is. It's supposed to be.
No, they charge for the license. You get an annual license fee.
I would have to look into that more than I guess.
I mean, I think you're going to have some businesses and stuff that would probably be unhappy with being charged more than they are at this point, just from a, because the license that the state requires has my understanding is where that goes. They charge the license, the local health passes that fee on to the state, and then the local health provides that license. They do the paperwork to provide the license.
Yes.
So that could potentially, I don't know how much in we're talking about. I can't imagine it's a lot. Maybe a couple $1,000, I'm guessing. So, if that is a sticking point, potentially maybe if the court still wants to move forward, we would just look at covering that with the county's contribution, if that's something that we wanted to do.
Yeah, I'm very foggy on what the fees are and what kind of fees are charged, what are the fees for, and are we charging?
Yeah, I don't have a clue, like if they go out and do testing for waste management, if there's a fee that goes with that. I know there's, I know in the restaurant dealer, it started several years ago at $480. It's up to $675 now, annual fee. But they don't charge you for the inspection when you come out to do the inspection. You just pay that annual licensing fee at the end of the year.
Oh, got it. Okay, so I think the confusion is that fee is covering the inspection. So the fee would be the same.
Yeah, I can't imagine it being different.
Yeah, I don't know, like if North Central, when they're doing those services, if when they have that license fee, if they keep part of that fee and send part of it onto the state, I don't have a clue.
When was the last time your restaurant was inspected?
It was in the fall of 19. And they're scheduled, according to Nicole, to have everybody caught up in October, November this year. Of course, excuses, COVID. And they have, I know, like in Arlington, there's been 3 businesses open up, and 2 of the 3 have been inspected for a pre-inspection, and 1 has not. And there was a requirement by the state that North Central needed to perform those inspections within 45 days. So they are 1/3 or 2/3 compliant in that area in Arlington. Just for information.
That's the information I was looking for.
Go ahead.
I do know the state has given the public health authorities some grace with inspections going on and letting that one slide a bit more than they would normally do. And I think some counties have continued to make that a priority, and others have let it go by the wayside. So hopefully that all gets caught up again here very soon. I also included just other possibilities. I mean, there is always a possibility of contracting out something else as we dive more into these programs and learn more about them. I'd like to think that I know quite a bit about all of them, but there's no way that I can know all the nitty-gritty details. But the one that we see pop up a lot is the WIC program. It's pretty complex. There's a lot that goes into it. Grant County contracts out a dietitian for their WIC program. So I just kind of included that as other possibilities that might come into play as well.
I've never understood why the state put WIC under public health and not under DHS. I've never understood why it landed under public health. It makes no sense. But for the state that's listening in to this, my feedback is that it belongs at DHS.
I'm going to turn the budget over to Holly here. She's our numbers expert in looking over all of that. So questions that you guys have about the budget, I know you've looked it over, and we can help clarify anything there.
So as with any budget, it's an estimate, and we just try to cover our bases. We do know for sure how much the health officer would charge. And then the environmental health, the contracted services, I did pad that a little bit. If we were to go to Umatilla County, we just don't know until we reach out to them and they would put an offer together. But based on what they do for what they charge Morrow County, I budget a little bit high on that, just in case. And so I don't know if I don't know that you want me to go through this line item by line item. I'm certainly happy to do that, or if you just want to open it up for questions.
Commissioners, What do you prefer? Do you want to just ask questions?
I think just ask questions for me. I don't know about you, Sherry.
If you have questions.
Questions, a few of the questions I've got is, and I don't know how relevant this is actually, but say for your providers, 15% of their time. And yes, there's also an increase in what that cost is in the budget for that 15%, correct?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, if you look down here, physician assistants, they've got 59.6 in the health authority budget. You've got 15% of their time now going to that. And I guess my question is, that mean they're only going to spend 85% of their time in the clinic or on clinic duties, and the 15% is it additional time and they're getting additional pay? How does all that? What's your thinking along those lines?
So the thinking is that we are having to on this, but get, you know, off of our operating grant. And as of right now, we have 2 physician assistants working full time in order for our clinic to be open 52 hours a week. And they are not fully, their schedule is not full. So they have time that they could dedicate to this. But the other thing is, a lot of what they do, like the whole immunization program that we run right now, we're actually a delegate of North Central Public Health. So, and Danny runs our immunization program. So she currently is doing a lot of public health job. And then also any testing for the COVID and for COVID and immunizations, that's our public health duty also. So there are things that we already do. So this is just for budgeting purposes, to just throw out a number and have something in there, was 15 to 20% of their time. And of course, after a year, you're going to know way more, because you have to keep really detailed budget sheets, time sheets on every program element that you implement. The state requires that. So this is really a starting point, just to get a number on for a budget.
And so would you anticipate, because I had Mark's sitting right behind you. And it came up during the work session about accessibility at Arlington. Would you anticipate that, like, say during back to school time, one of your physicians would go down there to help do their back to school, immunizations, and have a day where they're maybe working out of the North Clinic?
Yes.
Is that what
that is our vision, to meet the needs of their community. So between the school and the clinic would try to figure out how many times they would need us down there for the immunizations, and then same with the reproductive health. But we're unable to get numbers from their clinic and from North Central on how many people they're serving. But we can go off how many we're serving, I guess, to kind of give us an idea, and it's not very many.
Okay.
So, but yeah, those are things that we envision us going down there.
Yeah, what I envision is it being a regular schedule, like once a month, or twice a month or something, that someone is there for certain hours, so that the people in that county aren't having to travel if they don't have the means for that. So.
Yeah, again, it's all about the assessment, because you don't want to pay someone to go down there and sit and do nothing. So it's a matter of good communication between the clinics
analyze in
Yeah.
that first 12 months to see where we're at. And
Yeah.
make sure we're getting the word out and the advertisement that people know that it's available.
Absolutely, because the way, for instance, I'll give you an example of the way it works now with public health. We discovered one of our patients that was actually going to Grant County for public health services because that was the direction they were going, and they could not make it to the Dalles for the specific times they had available. They couldn't miss work. And so we called up public health and said, hey, you guys need to come out here and help this person. And so they did. They sent, I think it was 3 people to do 1 or 2, maybe 2 exams in one day. But that was a scheduled thing. Just like any clinical services, you have to schedule out. So.
Mark, did you?
Yeah, you're talking about what I was going to talk about. And so I think this would be a time for this to be thinking.
Absolutely.
I just want to say, to me, perception and everything. And when you see this, I think people in the North End are waiting to be able to be upset about something. And so I'd like to kind of do what we can to keep that from happening. Because otherwise it'll come back on me, I'm sure it will.
You and me both.
And I have to disrespect for Holly, and I'm sure it makes sense, but and I see public health as more of a, can be defined as a service rather than people. But at the workshop, you heard an Arlington resident talk about 2 days a week. And at that time, that was really not corrected or explained. So they're kind of left thinking that. And so I think we need to be really clear on how you're going to use them. And I'm really, it's important when you say 15% of physicians assistants, because I think Arlington feels, why can't they be some of that 15% too, to help our end? And to me, it's all about equal services, equal access. And but it's really important that we do what we can to correct that perception as much as possible. Whatever you can show that you're going to be working at that end. I know the survey wasn't done very well. I hear all that, but we still need that sense of we're part of the team, and because what people are going to key into is this is given to South County Health Department. And at the same time, if we have equal membership, 4-4, who's going to be that deciding vote? Because that may be necessary. Is that the court?
Good question. I mean,
what's that on the?
Are you talking about the advisory?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that there's not anybody from the court initially in the feasibility study assigned to the advisory board, which, I mean, we have that now, and it's probably an important piece that there's that tie.
We are open to adding anybody. We, just, as we're bringing information to the table, like who do we see as important? Absolutely. The court is important. I mean, it's open to anything. So it is definitely not, it's not a final decision. That's open to discussion. That's not something that we get to decide. As far as the clinical stuff goes, the one thing I'd like to point out, like what we're dealing with right now is North Central covers 3 counties and they offer 1 clinic for 3 counties. And that's the expectation that has always been, that we will travel to the Dalles, even though they're covering 3 of us. The expectation is we would go to them, or, if you push hard enough and you make enough phone calls, you can get them to bring people to us, to Gilliam County, but it's a matter of communication. So I guess our vision has been, if North Central runs their public health out of 1 location in the Dalles for 3 counties, having 1 location, 1 specific location for Gilliam County seems to make the most sense. It's not a huge, it's a big area, but it's not huge, like 3 counties worthy, and having 1 centralized clinic, but in that having better communication with all areas and knowing what they need and what they want and reaching out and making sure that we get to those people faster than what's currently being provided. And if that means setting up 1 day a week, if that's what the assessment shows us, is that there's enough people in Condon, there's enough people in Arlington, if that's what we need, then that's what we make happen. But we just don't know how much time that's going to take. But our intention would be, you know, if something's coming up in Arlington, just like Holly said, you know, there's exams that need to be done. We get on the phone to public health and say, we really need help with these exams. When can we get you here? And again, just a matter of communication and keeping that open and making sure that, you know, all ends are reaching out.
So just to speak some to Mark's concerns, and you have a budget, you're trying to stay within budget, and it's expensive to drive from Condon to Arlington. So maybe you have 1 or 2 residents that need something, but if you don't feel like you can afford to do it on the north end at that expense, it's much cheaper if they come to Condon to do it. You have the same problem we got going on today with North Central, and that's what we need to avoid. What is that that's going on?
So where were we?
So can I address a little bit of numbers? So just a little bit of comparison from when we first started the vaccinations back in January. I was trying to set up North Central Public Health to come do the pod in Condon and a pod in Arlington the same day. So we'd start at 10 o'clock in the morning in Condon, and then we'd have them go down and we'd have them start at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whatever time it was in Arlington. And I will tell you that the very first pod that we did, which encompassed, you know, Summit Springs employees and EMS and fire and law enforcement, stuff like that, I had 40, and this is when we had to do, you know, what was it, 10 doses per vial and all that crap. I had 40 doses that were giving out in Condon, and I had 10 that were given in Arlington. So that was the first pod, and it never got, I mean, I always had way more vaccinations given out in Condon than I did in Arlington, which is fine. We have a smaller population base. But also, North Central Public Health reached out to OHA at one time to have them come out and do testing. And so I had the OHA up at the fairgrounds and do testing in, I can't even remember when that was, May. And we had 30, I had 36 people go through the testing site up here at the fairgrounds, and we had 6 in Arlington. So again, the numbers kind of, you know, the numbers are kind of skewed, again, because of population, but we don't, I don't see a large population of people that are reaching out for vaccinations or reaching out for testing from down there. Mm-hmm. So again, I think until you start going down there and seeing how many people are really wanting to take advantage of public health, because mm-hmm. that's what it is. The shots, the testing, all that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. To me, by looking at those numbers, it's almost like a 2/3. Mm-hmm. So just a heads up on the numbers when it came to vaccinations and testing.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm just curious, could that be that same people could travel to the Dalles or who was it? It would be, because a lot of people would do that while they're shopping, whether they're special.
Well, testing was kind of an issue at the beginning because you had to have potentially symptoms and all that, you know, stuff last year. But this is when OHA came down through and they set up at the fire hall, and it was kind of a drive-through type of a testing situation. But
in Arlington,
yeah, yeah.
It's curious because I know we have a lot of people stop at Arlington to be tested because running the Dalles or these other places, it's too busy there because they come to Arlington.
They do now, yeah, because of the what do you call requirements in order to be tested. Yeah.
Is
So-
it fair to even look at the number of, I know it's, public health is different than like each individual clinic's patient low base. But is it fair to look at the clinic patient load
Clients.
between the two? Does that tell you anything? I
Well,
don't know, I mean, because
yeah.
it's public health completely different, but
Right.
the amount of patients you have at the Arlington clinic compared to the South clinic, is there any data that would be available?
I mean, where I could see where it could potentially, I mean, I'm just thinking like on vaccinations. Say your doctor is in the Dalles and you're not going to necessarily switch because public health's here. I mean, I get my flu shot when I go to have my annual exam. You know, I'm not necessarily contacting public health for those services. So I think it may, in some cases where you can get that service anywhere from your practitioner, I doubt people are going to say, oh, well, now since public health is here, you know, I'm going to get my shot in Arlington instead. If their doctor is already in Hermiston, I don't see people really changing that. So on some level, maybe it impacts it, but I don't think you'll really know, right, until you do a survey and see if access is an issue. And people are saying, well, I would like to get my shot in Arlington, but up until this point, you know, I haven't been able to make the one day that North Central Public Health was here or whatever. I mean, maybe it could shift that a little
I feel
bit.
like there's a lot more people on the north end with the interstate. It's easier to go somewhere over here as easy.
Yeah.
It's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
I think it's not apples and apples on the north and the south for sure, but I do think it's important that because you have a limited number of people that may want the services in Arlington, they don't get set back or ignored or delayed for any reason, or we're going to have some problems with the public. You know, there's going to be some of those that do need those services when they need them, and we need to improve what we're getting now, not be in the same place when we, you know, end up at the end of the day.
Well, I think education and what's available to them makes a big difference too, and making sure we're getting out there and letting people know what the services are and where they can get them is a big deal.
Chris Jackson, I see your hands up.
Yeah, every single time I've gone into the Arlington Medical Center to ask for something like a vaccine or just anything at all, I've been denied, being told that they don't offer those things there. I think really the difference between Arlington and Condon is an attitude towards the things like vaccines. And in that case, I think we should go with numbers only and remove the political or personal beliefs. I mean, if we had a large group of Seventh-day Adventists living in the middle of Arlington, they should still get the same amount of coverage as you have down in Condon, even though their requirements for service would be much smaller. It's just, we can't make that decision based on how many people are showing up, especially this year, especially now. But my experience has been is that I have to go to the Dalles to get everything done, everything. And as I said at the beginning in the opening session, you know, I was doing a lot of things to get in line before I sat down and did paperwork. So I would appreciate having more services in Gilliam County, or I'm sorry, up in Arlington, although I'd only be using them once a year. You only get one flu shot, so on and so forth. But nevertheless, I would appreciate having that option as opposed to either driving the 30 miles to Condon or driving the 45 miles to the Dalles.
One thing that might be helpful to even think about is, so the contracted services are going to be on demand, right? So that's not going to be an issue for North South. That'll be, you know, I mean, that's going to be basically whoever has a business or a septic that needs to be inspected. So what kinds of services, maybe this would be helpful for me to wrap my head around, are people actually accessing? They're accessing vaccines, testing, on reproductive health, are we finding that most people, I mean, maybe I'm naive about this, but I'm going to my women's clinic for most of my reproductive health. So like, how big is that population?
That was one of the questions we asked North Central directly, actually, was what does our, caseload look like for Gilliam County specifically? And we did ask them to break it down between, Condon zip code and Arlington zip code too, so that we could have some comparisons there. We're not getting that data, so we really have no idea how many people are actually using it.
So for reproductive health, since Obamacare, the majority of people are covered, so they have Medicaid. So it's not as big of a problem as it used to be. So the people you're talking about are the cash pay people, the ones that make too much to qualify for the Oregon Health Plan, but maybe they don't make enough to carry their own insurance. You would be talking about probably a teenager who doesn't want to show up under their parents' insurance. So it's a real small number as far as reproductive health goes. And that's why it's important to communicate with the clinics, because they should know their population. They're not going to know everyone because not everyone uses the local clinics. But the other good thing is that you would also be able to refer out to a specialist. So we're literally, if I had to put a number, if I had to guess the total number, I would guess possibly 5 people in Gilliam County. That would be my guess, just from knowing what we run through our clinic.
Yeah. Because that's my question, right? Is
When
like,
the time,
oh, go ahead.
is there something this is Denny Newell, is there something I'm supposed to push in order to talk, or do I just butt in when inappropriate?
You can just butt in. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a budget question, and I'll preface it by saying I know little about the feasibility study, but the question I have regards the intended agreement between Public Health and South Gilliam Health District. Would that be a contractual arrangement?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. If the court decided to move forward with bringing public health back and with contracting or working with South Gilliam, I say working with because our attorneys are still figuring out how that agreement would need to actually look. So right now they're looking at 2 different scenarios. One would be to do a direct contract with South Gilliam. So that would be, legal document. They need to make sure, our attorneys are making sure that we can actually transfer our authority in that way. That's what they're double checking. If we are unable to do that, then what we would have to look at doing is actually creating a separate 190 organization, which is basically when 2 government entities want to create a third kind of thing, in which case we would have to pass another legal document, basically, where our board and their board would have to agree to create this third entity that had a board overseeing it, which is what we do right now with North Central Public Health. That's us, Sherman and Wasco County, in an agreement, creating a separate 190. So that's what our attorneys are looking at right now. If we're not able, that they're advising that the cleanest way is to do a contract, but they are checking to make sure that that is actually legal, that we can actually transfer our jurisdiction in that way. Because it is the county court.
So let me follow up on that. If it ends up that there is an agreement between the 2 entities, a contractual agreement, then the providers will be employees of North County. South County. Excuse me, South County.
Correct. If it's a contract agreement, then they would continue to be South Gilliam. If it's where we have to create a separate 190 entity, then they would become, probably what you would do is you would have the administrator be the employee of the 190, and they would contract with South Gilliam for the physician's time, is likely how you would structure it. So South Gilliam's employees would remain South Gilliam's employees, and South Gilliam would accept the liability for their employees, and the 190 would provide the funding for the services. I'm just shooting from the hip though. Our attorneys are probably be like, oh my gosh, don't say all of that in public. But I think that's how it would be structured.
Well, there are monetary considerations in either of those two options. Are those factored into your budget?
In terms of, can you say more on that? What?
Well, it occurs to me that if we form a ORS 190, there are monetary, probably increased monetary obligations as a consequence of yet another organization that has to have insurance coverages, et cetera, where that may not be the case if there's a contractual arrangement between the two entities, the county and South County Health.
So I base this on the state telling us directly that they believe, since we are a special district, that we were going to be able to enter into an IGA with the county, and they would be able to transfer their authority over to South Gilliam County Health District because they're a special district. But that's the question that the lawyers have to work out. So I needed to go off of something, and that's what I went off of, is what the state has already told me.
But I think you're correct. If we had to do a 190, then we'd have to look at the budget, because there would be things like you have to have a separate audit. You have to, I mean, there's some other state law requirements that would probably come into play. So my hope is that a contractual agreement is going to be suitable. But as I said, we're waiting to hear back from the attorneys. They gave me an initial read, and I asked them to go back and answer a different question than they initially thought.
Yeah, and we do know that the way Wheeler County is ran would be different than the way we run it. And Wheeler County is still the authority, and they contract with the administrator who runs the whole health department. But the county has to keep track of all the money, and it's a real bookkeeping nightmare for Wheeler County. They don't like it, but that's the way they are currently doing it.
I was watching the micro facial reaction on Kelly in the back.
Please don't.
Please don't.
It seems to me that satisfying that question is fundamental to proceeding. I don't know what your next steps are, but until that question is answered, I would not take too many steps forward.
I agree with Denny on that. I'm sitting here thinking, how soon are we going to hear from the attorneys? Because this could be a huge difference in the budget. It's a kind of a tight budget anyway. And you know, any excesses are going to fall back on the county. We need to know that right up front.
I'm not sure I understand why they think the huge differences would be.
I think it's just been explained that you're going to have additional costs if you form. There's two ways to look at it. I mean, Denny just explained the difference in what
Well, I just know the way, if we don't, I know the way the state that we move forward. And I know the way Wheeler County does it. So those are the two options. And so I've looked at Wheeler County's budget, and it's not, there isn't huge expenses related to the way they have to run it through the bookkeeping to the county.
The only thing, because there's insurance already in the proposed budget, and there's already legal fees in there, which those are the two things if you have a separate entity, I would think. So I think those are already budgeted. The only other thing that's not in there, well, no, it is. You have an audit and accountant line item in there. So I'm not sure that it actually, it looks like those kind of key things would already be covered, or they're already being budgeted for.
They may be a line item in your budget, but they're going to be significantly greater if you are an ORS as opposed to being a part 15% of something else.
So what we'll do on this particular question, again, originally what I got back from our attorneys was, here are the different potential structures, but they didn't answer the underlying question, which is, can the court transfer its jurisdiction directly over? And so I am asking Carrie to look into that. Our legal counsel has had a couple of turnovers, so the person who was looking into it has since left. And so she is sort of picking it up and figuring out where we were. So that's why we have the little bit of a delay, is that we've had a little turnover in our folks. But I can ask her if she can expedite that and get us an answer by the next meeting, if that's helpful.
I would also like to just add Frontier Telenet, Frontier is 911, the fire services that we just developed would all kind of be the same thing. And I've been involved in those, and I have seen this exorbitant cost that they would be talking about. We do have an audit cost, but it is incorporated in with the entity that's doing our budget.
Yeah, and I think that by looking at the ORS, I mean, the health authority can only be transferred in 3 ways. And it's if 2 or more counties join, and then the IGA between 2 county governments. And that's the one that we would fall under, being a special district. And that's why I reached out to the state, and they came back. That's the cleanest, simplest way. And then the other one is the county stays the authority, and they contract out all the public health services. And that's the way Wheeler County does it, is the 3rd way.
And if that's the 3rd
Well,
way.
it seems,
Go ahead, Denny.
seems to me like it makes eminent sense to do it option number 2 between South Health and the county, if that is, if your attorneys decide that that's a doable and way to go, far less expensive.
Yes, most definitely, and less of a headache for the county and for the health district. It just would make more sense. But I haven't heard anything from the state that would contradict us being able to do that.
Great. Additional questions while we're on the budget? I'll return us back to where.
Well, we briefly talked in the work session about startup costs, and there's 80,000 in there for startup costs. And I guess just for to have that discussion a little bit deeper, that 80,000 is going to come from where? Are we assuming that's going to come from what we can get out of North Central when we do our divorce, or where do we think that's coming from?
I mean, that is my hope, is that we would be able to, from whatever sitting sort of back in reserves at North Central Public Health, that would be used as sort of the seed money for this. But of course, the divorce is going to be happening during the transition. So what I would anticipate is that we would need to float the money. And then when the divorce settlement comes in, to continue with the analogy, then that would reimburse the county for the costs that were outlaid during that transition period.
Yeah, so, and I'm just thinking of long-term. I mean, I'm just looking at the financials and the long-term effect on the county budget and where you're at. And we got the 3% in, which we've got with North Central. That really doesn't change. Our costs actually today are closer to $70 than they are in the spreadsheet on here, because it was done in what, 18 or something.
2018, yes.
And so we're close to $70 now with county contribution. And that increases to it. And what was the population, 1985 or something? To 72 just in this budget. And long-term, what is the sustainability of a local health without just continuing to increase, you know, and anything that comes over budget, how's, you know, what are the thoughts on how you deal with that?
For the operating part of it, it all is going to be revolve around the program elements that you sign up to implement in your county. So then there's dollar amounts attached to those. So, you know, it's just like the way we run our budget, you only spend what you have. The other thing is that we haven't really talked about is because you would have your own local public health, there are other pots of money through the state and the federal government for public health grants that North Central goes and gets on behalf of Gilliam County, but we don't know what they are. We don't know, you know, how much would be, you know, given on our behalf. So this would be a direct source and come in, you would apply for a grant and give our numbers and we get to use the money and see it. So there's also those options, but again, until we are established, we don't know what the possibilities are. And the other revenue stream is, you know, when you do see patients like for reproductive health, the state does pay for those visits. But it's just hard to know. So those aren't in here. Hard to know what those are. So these are just estimates and just something to start with. You have to have something to start with. But there is potential monies out there. Just like the COVID, I believe North Central has gotten over $2 million, 2.8 or something like that. But we don't really see it. So.
Additional questions on budget, startup?
No, so what's our next step here? Wait and see where we are with legal and how it.
Do you guys have more slides or?
There's just a few.
Okay.
Yeah.
One sec, Pat, they have a few more slides and then I think we can get to next steps.
We're close. We just wanted to talk about the transition phase a little bit. We've really tried to coordinate all of this with our contracts with North Central Public Health and also with the fiscal year and the way that is set up with the state. We do have to give North Central a 180-day withdrawal notice. So, you know, if we wanted to try to implement this in for next year, that notice would have to be given by the end of December. That would give us a 6-month transition time, January to June. And then, so North Central would continue to provide us services during that transition time because we would still be under contract with them through June. And that would give us our transition time to work with the state and do our assessments and get things set up here. What else do we have? The administrator, we talked about that a little bit earlier. So during that transition time, we kind of feel like they would be a part-time position. We don't think it would have to be a full-time position. And we have our state contact already in line, who has said already that he's our point of contact. He's going to help us through and with all the next steps. We went over startup costs. Do we want to touch on that anymore? Do we feel like we're okay there as part of the conversation?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm okay. Pat, are you okay on the startup costs or any?
Yeah, there's going to be some. I'm just trying to figure out where it's coming from to pay for them.
Touched on the programs and the funding that comes from the program elements. We included in an appendix in that report. We didn't include all the program elements that are out there. It is pages and pages full of programs. I don't think you're quite that interested, but we can certainly pull those up if you would like. But we went through and sorted through, you know, what other counties are offering and nearby, you know, what we think we might be interested in, and pulled those up and listed those in the report. But of course, doing the assessment of all the communities and figuring out what is needed before we decide on any of those programs. And again, the funding, that's all going to come from what programs we opt into. And then the state also helps us decide on, you know, do they think we are capable of providing that program? It's not just a given, you know, they're looking at all scenarios with what they think we can do too, and giving us basically permission to partake in that. Advisory board, Pat, you touched on that a little bit before. Again, this is just a list that we kind of put together and started. It is not final by any means, but you know, we're hoping to have equal sight into all, you know, all the communities that are out there. We want the advisory board is there to help give knowledge on what they're seeing from the community and what those needs are from the community, so that they can better direct the public health authority on what needs to happen. And so we want to see a good representation from all areas of our county. And same with the local agencies and who the public health authority would be working with. Again, we want to see representation from as many different agencies as possible and talking to those agencies on a regular basis, so we know the needs and can help fulfill those. And then we get on to the next steps.
There we are.
There we are. Not too many more.
So yeah, Pat, to your question, yes, I think the next, for sure, we need clarification from the attorneys on if the court decided they wanted to move forward, what the best arrangement would be, what makes the most sense. And so I would anticipate, I can ask Carrie to have that back to us for our next meeting so that we have that information. Is there additional information or questions that you folks, commissioners, need answered in order to make a decision?
No, I think that's the big one for me. I mean, obviously, we've got 3 meetings probably to make a decision, so we need to move pretty rapidly.
Yeah. Because what I would say if we wanted to move forward is that we, the important thing I think is now, and the notice to North Central Public Health is that we make sure everybody is comfortable with how the partnership would look. That agreement to me needs to be the thing that gets put in place, because the divorce proceedings can happen during the transition period. We just need to give our notice, and that starts the discussion. The attorneys can then start working on what it looks like to bring to disentangle ourselves from that entity. So that, to me, what the partnership looks like is probably the most important thing we need to get dialed in early if the court wants to move that direction. Without putting the commissioners too much on the spot, I think it would be helpful in dealing with our counterparts over at North Central, our other counties, to have this not come as a surprise. And they have reached out at various times. And I don't know, Pat, if you want to share, did North Central meet yesterday?
Yeah, I actually talked to Kathy. She questioned me in depth at the AOC district meeting last week, and they have put me on the agenda to give them an update next Tuesday at 4 o'clock for that meeting. So they're interested in what's going on. You know, I mean, Kathy wanted to make sure we knew this was going to be a big lift, and it kind of is. I don't think it's as big a lift as they want us to think it is, maybe. But yeah, they want to be updated, and it's only fair that we are transparent, let them know what's going on, in my opinion.
So commissioners, would you anticipate being, because I'm looking at this schedule, I'm just looking on the wall behind you, Mark, I'm not looking at you. So we have a meeting on the 20th. So that would be when we would be getting advice back from legal counsel. We have a meeting on the 3rd. Pat, are you going to AOC?
Yes.
Okay, so am I correct in assuming we would just have the one November meeting unless we need a special meeting?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so I think we would realistically, if we wanted to have an agreement drawn up by the attorneys where both boards get to look at it and approve it before the end of December, we would probably need to have a decision made on the 3rd about
I would agree.
Okay, so with that in mind, I just want to make sure, and I'll just put this out there, like if there's any question that comes up that we need a legal response from, maybe shoot it to Teresa after the meeting so I can make sure that we get all of those questions answered in time to actually deliberate. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So for the public, I see the Times Journal is on here. I am putting you on notice that this is a significant decision. And the court has indicated that it will be making a decision by November 3rd. Therefore, if you want to weigh in, you need to be at the next meeting, which is the 20th. Please do not come at the 11th hour. Come and participate just as you did in Arlington. I feel like I'm using my mom voice, but I just cannot reiterate this enough. This is a big decision the court is making, and it is on a tight time frame. So please be engaged. Okay. Mom voice,
Well
done.
said.
Anything else on this particular thing? Do we feel like we've got a...
No, I think you've done an excellent job of presenting what needed to be presented. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Liz,
Yep.
just,
Thank you much.
I'm more than willing to field any questions. If anyone wants to call me at the clinic, you know, we'd certainly be happy to talk about this with anyone, so.
Well, yeah, in the meantime, you know, if people have questions, yeah, my phone number is also on the website, so
Yeah.
please ask. Please ask rather than guess.
Yes, all three of the court members have their cell phones on the website. So there is really no excuse for folks to reach out and ask questions and weigh in if you have concerns or things that you think we need to consider, or even things that you think if the agreement moves forward, what should be part of the agreement. Okay, enough said on that. Thank you guys for
Thank
being
you.
here and the great discussion.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, let's move on to 5.3, which is discussion regarding utilization of the ARPA funds. Pat, I think you wanted us to circle back on this one. You're muted.
Yes. This kind of started in county college their last session, and Andy Smith did a presentation, and they've kind of expanded as far as County Solutions have expanded their look at what they're trying to put together through the counties, and obviously fund through the counties, to lay some, I guess, lay groundwork for what the needs are out there and how to use existing ARPA funds. But more important than that, what I got out of it is positioning for future funding coming down the road through the infrastructure bill and those things that are at least partially, at least likelihood that there's going to be some money coming. And so I kind of changed my thinking in our discussion before on the whether we should participate or not. And my personal discussion with Andy was it wasn't fair the way they have it set up. 25,000 for a county of 1,900 people and 25,000 for Multnomah County is not a fair way for County Solutions to fund their programs that they're trying to put in place. So, and I did reach out to Andy this morning, just send him the agenda to see if he wanted to get on, and he did and hasn't responded, but I will get a hold of him before, and I'd like to get him at the next meeting. And I think it'd be critical to have well, Catherine there and Jeff Buffton, Mayor Buffton, and talk about, because I think primarily the needs you're really talking about are going to be tied closely to the cities for the most part.
Okay.
And especially in water, but it's water and housing. When I say they expanded it, they're looking at this with housing too. And it's really about getting shovel ready for projects when the funds get here and not starting after the funding is available. And it's probably important that we figure out how to participate. And they said that they will work with the counties on what they can afford and what their needs are and customize to county needs. So I don't think it would cost us what their initial email said. And I want to get it back out there because we probably need to pursue this and get a little more information from Andy on how to do that. I talked to him at AOC last week in person, and he's willing to do whatever to get in front of us and help us through what we can do to help them do what they can do for us.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like for follow-up then, can you connect Andy with Teresa and we could get him on the agenda for the 20th?
Yep, I can.
Okay. Any other follow-up for now on that?
Nope. I just want to get it back on our radar screen so we were thinking about it and don't miss an opportunity.
Okay, great. Sounds like we can get him added on the 20th and learn more. Okay, let's move into commissioners. How are you doing? Do you need a little break? You want to keep going?
I could take a quick break.
Jerry?
2 minutes. You got 2 minutes, mister.
All right.
It is 11:45 and we are back in session. I see we have Commissioner Shannon back as well as Commissioner Wilkins and I. Let's move into new business, discussion and possible action regarding funding for the Cottonwood Tower. Okay, so I'll give you not the long history. I'll give you the very brief one. Yeah. Which is during our September 21st meeting, the Frontier Telenet Board discussed the tower at Cottonwood Canyon State Park. A little bit of history, years and years and years ago, Sherman County received a grant from the state to locate the tower near Cottonwood Canyon State Park. And having the communications tower was a condition of their land use permits. Sherman then transferred those funds to Frontier Telenet because the tower was going to be part of the Frontier Telenet network. To date, the tower is still unbuilt. And now that it's been years and years and years, it's more expensive to build it. And so Frontier Telenet is short about $300,000 roughly needed to complete it. So the Sherman County Court met prior to the 21st and had initially approved full funding for it. Then during our Frontier Telenet meeting, Joe said he really would like Gilliam County to fund half. I think the Sherman Court would, when they approved the funding, had hoped that we would fund half. Originally, they were willing to go in regardless, but Joe's kind of backed away from that, Judge DeBolskus, and said that he really felt like it needed to be a 50-50 partnership. So that is the question before the court, is whether we are up for splitting the approximately $300,000 cost. And if so, the big item up for discussion is who would build it, whether we want that project to be managed by Frontier Telenet or we want one of the counties, Gilliam or Sherman, to take responsibility for building it. And the idea would be that the tower then is owned by the counties jointly and is not a Frontier Telenet. Frontier Telenet would use it. We would have an agreement with Frontier Telenet for their usage, but that it would be county property. I'm not sure exactly how that works when two counties co-own. That's something that we'll have to ask the auditors what that would look like, but that is the proposal before. Sheriff Betancourt, do you have anything you want to add? Did I get it? I didn't get into the whole history.
I don't know really what the feeling is from the court, but I think it's kind of currently where things are. I think it's really a good idea for the Gilliam County to own part of that tower. You know, I mean, it's a structure, so, you know, I don't know why that can't be. The land is not owned by either county. It's leased. The current agreements for the project, the project manager and is already in place. So, and I don't see why his capabilities are in question. I mean, he could still manage the project as far as I see it, but it's not my money either. So, but I would like the county to own part of that tower. And I think it is a vital asset for our communication system. There's also the possibility of agreements for, you know, other entities to hang equipment on there and possibly get some revenue off of that. I think it's with kind of how Frontier Telenet's being managed, that it would be important that there's paperwork in place identifying the owners of that and where the revenue would go if any revenue were to be hacked from that project, that it come back to the counties.
Are you suggesting that government entities should be documenting their decisions and agreements?
Well, that's,
No way.
I think that entity has a tradition of maybe not having things documented.
Chris Jackson, I see your hand is raised.
All right, this is something I actually know about. For the last 23 years, that's kind of what I did for this Bureau of Environmental Services at the City of Portland. And this may be a little bit premature, but I have to say it, is that we need to map out what part of that tower will belong to the Gilliam County. In particular, we've had on the towers we had in Portland, we had problems with private contractors coming in and erecting large antennas that blocked out other antennas or interfered with other antennas. It's an engineering question, but you really need to map it out. You need to make sure that somebody has got, you know, has the right to put that antenna up pointed in that direction with that amount of horizon and with that much power coming out of it. They all interfere with each other. I've actually had antennas that were so close together that when the wind blew, one antenna blew over and broke the other antenna. Who paid for that? Well, it was up in the air. So it's just, not only do we need to, I agree, we need to identify who gets what money, but we also need to identify who gets what ground space up there or what platform space, who gets to put antennas where, how tall the antennas are, where they're directed, what kind of antennas they are. And that's really pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioners, initial feedback. If we decided to move forward, I don't need a motion today because I think what we would be looking at is drafting up an agreement with Sherman County on that we both agree to put money in. And then we would also need to have an agreement with Frontier Telenet on the running of it, if that's the direction we wanted to go in. So I'm just looking for direction on if you would like to contribute.
Well, I did listen in on the Frontier Telenet meeting, so I am very aware of what was transpired there. Yeah, I think there's a large need for it as far as Frontier 911 and the communications that we need. So I would like to see Frontier Telenet to be out of it as much as possible.
What was the last part of that you said, Sherry?
I'd like to see Frontier Telenet out of it as much as possible.
Well, I kind of have to go with the sheriff's recommendation, so that's where I'm at.
Right? You can't trust him, who can you trust?
That's a campaign slogan if ever I've heard one.
I don't have to sign up.
So it sounds, Chris, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. What about our co-op here? The co-op here in Arlington is trying very hard to get high-speed internet. And with all the canyons and the beauty of the nature out here, you just can't go coax. You have to go radio waves. So they might have a say in this too. And I'm certain they're going to want to put something up there if there's an opportunity.
Great. Yeah, I think John already has some ideas of where he wants to place things, and Frontier Telenet has definitely been, of course, this would not be a Frontier tower, but I would say we probably need to build it first before we figure out who's going to be on it, other than us and ODOT.
Well, I guess if you build it, they will come. That's really what it is. This is the wave of the future, especially for high-speed internet in rural areas. If you want to get this internet out there into the hinterlands, towers are where they go.
So it sounds like there's consensus that we are willing to split the cost with Sherman County. Am I correct?
Yeah, what are we looking at, 150,000?
I believe so.
And where would that come from?
We would probably need to take it out of, well, we have some options. We could either take it out of discretionary. I think there's probably enough in there. There is an argument, I don't know if Commissioner Shannon would agree with me on this, but there is an argument that the people who are using the river are primarily tourists, and that this is an economic development infrastructure, because this is allowing the state park to have folks down there and us to provide emergency services when something goes haywire. So you could make an argument, depending on how you want to define economic development, that this is an economic development infrastructure need, because it was a condition of the state park being located there to begin with. So if you are of the opinion that economic development includes tourism, then that could potentially be another source. Those are the two off the top of my head that I can think of that.
So when you're talking about it in that area, is that primarily who it would or where it would offer services is just down on the river?
That is the original intention behind it was to service the park, Cottonwood Canyon. And I don't know what the range is. I mean, Gary maybe would have a better idea of.
Jade Wireless, I mean, it's been engineered and I haven't seen the map of the circumference that it would cover and line of sight for microwave. I don't know.
So we're not sure how far up and down the river / into each of the counties it would go, but the original intent was to service Cottonwood Canyon State Park.
And everybody feels there's a justification to spend $300,000 just to service the park.
Gary, you want?
I think one of the big issues is $375,000 the state gave for that has. So if we're going to give the $375,000 back, there's $190,000 of it left. I mean, you're looking at the same amount of money that has to be sent back. So
Yeah, so here's some of the detail that I left out, which is that Frontier Telenet has spent part of that state grant for the equipment, et cetera, for the tower. So if we don't build the tower, we're going to need to come up with the money to pay the state back. And then we'll just have equipment, but no tower. And so the thing for the board was that it made more sense to actually have something for the money than equipment that we wouldn't have a tower to place it on, I think is the thinking. Let me just say that Sheriff Betancourt and I have repeatedly expressed our frustration, is that fair, Gary, at the mismanagement of this project prior to me being on the board and Joe being on the board, that this should have been taken care of years ago. And this is one of those things that frankly is cleaning up.
I guess because this is a public meeting, I'm trying to be, not say too much, but entity that knows that they're going broke and going to be broke, and they do not change management style or do anything different or reorganize is beyond me why it's headed that way, but Judge has given her opinion and tried wholeheartedly to change things, and nothing is being changed because of she's the minority. It's beyond me why things are being done the way they are, but I even to the point where I question ethics seriously and how tax dollars are being spent. I just think that goes a lot deeper.
So the bottom line is we spend $150,000 to build the tower, or we spend $150,000 to pay back to help Frontier Telenet pay back the grant that they got that they've already spent money from. Is that?
Yeah, I don't think the state would ever come back and require that back, but I guess, you know.
But ethically, we would take money that we didn't spend as a grant that was not spent where it was supposed to be spent.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't do something, then we're as guilty as anybody else for taking money from a grant that wasn't.
Right. I mean, it's just an open door, open end that can't be closed.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, everybody wants to ignore it and turn away from it. And it just needs to be dealt with and finalized and move
Yes,
on.
I agree.
So do we have consensus? I'll go back to the original question that we would like to go in 50-50 with Sherman.
Yes, as long as it's Sherman and Gilliam.
Pat?
Yeah, I appreciate the information you provided about the grant because that is important, I think. But yeah, I would agree.
Now, in terms of managing the project, Sherry had made reference to maybe having Frontier Telenet be less involved. What is our feeling? Do we want one of the counties to manage the project, or is what we're talking about really that we keep the project manager, the Frontier Telenet hired, but maybe have Judge DeBolskus and I being the ones who are overseeing that
Yes,
rather than the board?
yes.
Yeah, I would be more comfortable in that than the board.
Okay. Which I think there's some precedent for that, because when Wheeler County did its internet thing, that was really, Joe and I kept our hands off and Judge Morley ran that. So I think there's some precedents to do that. So next steps then would be to actually document the partnership before we move forward with finding where the money is going to come from and all that. I'll touch base with Nathan and figure out the various places where it could come from. So I'll probably be coming back to ask your preference on that. And then we'll get legal counsel working. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to ask Joe if Sherman County's legal counsel can take the first stab at drafting, since ours is going to be working on public health. That way we're not held up. So I'll see if I'll give Joe a call, Judge DeBolskus, and see if Sherman County can take a stab at the draft on partnering.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear we're willing to do that.
Yeah. And then we'll come back with those documents for the court's approval at a later date. We'll aim for probably realistically November is what I'm guessing, if not December. Okay, anything else on this particular thing? Since we are talking about Frontier Telenet, I did want to raise this. I think Sherry probably heard this, and Sheriff Betancourt alluded to this, but I want to make sure that I'm being fully transparent about my frustrations with the board at Frontier Telenet. We had a discussion at Frontier 911 about the need for those two boards to be better coordinated, so that the people who are actually using the system were part of the discussion about how that system is being run and managed. When I tried to have that added as an agenda item to the Frontier Telenet board, my colleagues basically said that they would not even entertain a discussion. So it's not that I am frustrated that they disagree with me. I am frustrated that they don't even want to talk about it. And I think, I'm going out on a limb here a little bit, but I think that it is worth at least exploring whether we need to be part of that entity in order to have the capabilities that our emergency responders need. Because I am concerned that if we continue on the trajectory we're going, that it is not sustainable, that the counties basically are just going to continue to backfill budgets indefinitely. And that if our colleagues are unwilling to even talk about making changes, we're going to be locked into a partnership where we just keep sending more and more money and then really not even having a voice at the table, which is what happened to me at our last meeting. They, in fact, just said, I think Judge Morley's comment was, I don't feel we need to discuss what you would like to discuss.
And I, prior to being elected to this position, I had attended quite a few of the Frontier Telenet meetings and have tried to do that continually. And it is frustrating because every time we turn, they just ask the counties for more money and more money and more money. And it doesn't seem to me that the that entity is growing in any way. It's just stagnant in what it's doing, and it just keeps saying, we're broke and you have to give us money. And I don't think that's in the interest of any of us. And it's fun.
One other thing too is Frontier Regional 911 did not used to contribute money into Frontier Telenet. We are now giving $300,000, and which is fine. It's a user's fee, but then there is the $256,000 that Jefferson County gives in and above the 911 funds, and that money has always meant to be to cover the additional 4 positions and call takers we needed. And plus they are at least 70% usage of the center. And Judge Morley has indicated at our last 911 meeting, asked to have that money into Frontier Telenet. So they are continuously looking for Band-Aids in full well knowing that they're going broke and they can't sustain what they have on what they get. And the reason I brought up the whole ethics question is, and I don't know this is something be above my level that would have to look into it. But when you've got an entity that is solely reliant on day wireless and the amount of money that they give to that entity, and then have people breaking off from that entity, starting up businesses that just fall right in line with, contractually. I think it's unethical to not put those services out to bid and to not look at other entities to provide that service. They have had full reign over this system since its inception, and we have never looked at a different way or a cheaper cost to manage it. So I really think that there could be some issues if it were to be looked into, but to not even want to discuss another person to manage the entity, but you just take somebody that's been there that already has contracts to project to manage contracts. What do I want to say? But I guess that's projects. Managing projects and just bring them right in as a manager of the entity. It's just really, to me, wrong.
Seemed to be a conflict of interest.
Oh, serious conflict.
So,
and the amount of dollars that you're talking about in any other thing, I think would have to go out to bid.
Yes.
It would.
Yes.
And
I think getting out is really something we should think about, and just to protect ourselves from the way things are being
It's a
handled.
huge liability for the county.
Yes, it's very scary, actually.
so I just wanted to sort of put you guys on notice that I am exploring with other subject matter experts on what our options might be. I don't have any proposals, but I just, and that is not to say that I don't have a good working relationship with both of my colleagues. It's just on this particular issue, for whatever reason, they are very set on keeping things the way they've always been. And that's fine, but not okay when we're not able to have discussions that we need to have. So anyway, I wanted to make sure I had that on the record so that people are not surprised as I continue those discussions. Questions or anything on this particular topic?
No.
Okay, let's move on to 6.2, which is consider approval of resolution number R 2021-12, declaring county vehicle as surplus equipment. So this is for the 2001 Chevy Suburban. It's been used previously by the OICC crew. This past summer, thanks to some of the COVID relief dollars, there was additional money that came in through the OICC program. So we were able to purchase an upgraded vehicle that is actually large enough for the crew to sit in and for them to secure all of the equipment so that it's not, flying around if you have to stop suddenly.
It's a safer vehicle.
And so the old vehicle, the Chevy Suburban, is no longer needed. Teddy put together the briefing and noted that it has 137,399 miles. Again, we purchased a replacement, so it's not needed for OACC use. We're not anticipating having 2 crews going forward. This was sort of a one-off thing because of an influx of state funding, but I think we'll likely go back to our one crew next summer. And so she is recommending that it be surplused, but left it open, and the resolution would need to be amended to include if you guys want to have a minimum bid. So that was kind of the question. The initial question for you guys is if you want to surplus it, what if anything you want to put as a minimum bid? Thoughts?
Has anybody researched book value?
Yeah, so the Kelly Blue Book, this is the private sale estimate, is anywhere between 35.56 and 59.63 for our zip code. So the private party value was set at 4,760. So I don't know if we wanted to take the low end of the range, since it is a minimum, and it would be put on the publicsurplus.com, which is a bid site. So that was just sort of where the opening bid would be, but of course it would go up from there if there's multiple bidders.
Right.
I would say we would want to at least do the minimum value.
Okay, so can I use round numbers and say maybe 3,500?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so then I would need a motion to adopt the resolution as amended with that minimum bid at 3,500.
I move to adopt resolution number R 2021-12 as amended with a minimum bid set at $3,500.
Second.
And moved and seconded that we adopt resolution number R 2021-12 as amended with the minimum bid set at $3,500. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's move on to 6.3. Consider approval of fiscal year 2021-2022 salary schedule for public transportation coordinator position. So this is part of our ongoing recruitment for the public transportation coordinator / director. If you'll recall, back on August 18th, we approved the updated position description for the coordinator position. But then what we found once we put it out is people wanted to know what they would be paid, believe it or not.
Amazing.
So if it's a coordinator position, that would be represented by the union. When we negotiated that contract, that was not part of the salary schedule that we negotiated with them. So this is basically asking us to go ahead and set what that salary schedule for the transportation coordinator would be. And then if you look in there, basically what Lisa did was take where the other deputies and coordinators are and match that so that we didn't have discrepancies between the other represented employees and this person. So the recommendation, if you guys want to move forward, would be basically to adopt that salary schedule with the public transportation coordinator position included. And then we would go ahead and notify the union. And again, this is in order for us, we at this point don't know if we're going to be hiring a coordinator or a director. It depends on the qualifications of the applicant pool. But people did want to know what we were going to pay them, and we didn't have a good answer. So
that looks like where it fits and where it should be.
So is the wage set the same for a coordinator or a director? Am I missing something?
No, so the director was already approved as part of when we approved the salary schedules earlier this year.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm with you.
The director was non-represented, and so it was in a separate one, but we neglected the transportation coordinator position, which would be represented when we did the collective bargaining agreement.
All right. I'm with you.
Okay, any other questions? Over that. I move to approve the updated salary schedule to include the public transportation coordinator position.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we the updated salary schedule to include the public transportation coordinator position. And just noting that this is for our, the salary schedules for our represented folks, just for the record. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving right along. Consider first reading and adoption of ordinance number 2021-05, ratifying the creation of the Gilliam County Fire Services Agency in accordance with ORS 190.085 and declaring an emergency. So, Sheriff Betancourt has been working on this forever. I think is the actual long, he's been working with our legal counsel as well as with the 4 partners that have been made up the fire services board, which is the City of Arlington, City of Condon, North Gilliam Fire District, and South Gilliam Fire District. Basically to update and ratify the IGA that creates the agency. In order to actually create a 190 agency, the county court and then each of the partners, so the other 4, will all need to pass ordinances. Our ordinance contains an emergency clause. I want to put this on the record because the idea was to have the IGA become effective on January 1 so that their books and everything are clean. But the way that statute works for counties is that we would have had to have a second reading in 2 weeks, and then it would not be effective for 90 days after, which would have ran clear into January. So it would have put in limbo how fire services needed to set up its accounts, pay its bills, and all this kind of stuff. And so our legal counsel suggested that the way to make this clean is to contain that emergency clause so that fire services can be up and running on January 1 without having this weird delay. So that is why there's an emergency declared. It also, because there's an emergency declaration, requires only 1 reading. So normally we would do 2. That's why we only have to do 1, and then we can proceed directly to adoption. So, questions?
No question for me.
Nope.
I move to have the first reading of ordinance number 2021-05 by title only.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to have the first reading of ordinance number 2021-05 by title only. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, ordinance number 2021-05, an ordinance of Gilliam County ratifying creation of the Gilliam County Fire Services Agency in accordance with ORS 190.085 and declaring an emergency.
Oh, hello. I move to accept the first reading of ordinance number 2021-05 by title only and to adopt the ordinance.
A second.
Moved and seconded that we accept the first reading of ordinance number 2021-05 by title only and to adopt the ordinance. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's go on to 6.5. Dewey's been waiting patiently. This is consider approval of amendment number 1 to road use agreement number 2018-02 with Brookfield. Dewey, do you want to give us or Pat, what's happening with this?
Dewey on?
Yes, I am.
He is.
Oh, okay. What's going on is at the repower project, they were only going to use small portions of Ray Road and with very little impact. Well, the project no more than started, and they were bringing in huge crane parts, heavy equipment, everything, using the road pretty much to their discretion with no protection for Gilliam County. And so I got with them and with Pat also, and we've added this amendment to include the road, which is from Highway 74 all the way to the west boundary of the repower project. And that's basically, this is to protect the Gilliam County taxpayers for the investment we just did by paving Ray Road.
Got it. So in essence, we already approved the crux of the agreement. This is just extending the amount of road that's under the agreement. Am I correct?
Yep.
That's correct.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Questions, Sherry?
I have no question.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I suppose Sherry wants me to make one.
I'd like for you to.
I move to approve amendment number 1 to road use agreement number 2018-02 as amended or presented. Approve the amendment as presented.
As presented, yeah. I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve amendment number 1 to road use agreement number 2018-02 as presented. Is there further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Dewey, we'll get it signed.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Dewey.
All right, Pat, we're on to Eastern Oregon Counties Association dues discussion.
Yeah, I just was on a meeting last week and it was mentioned that there were several counties, or a couple counties anyway, 2 or 3 counties that hadn't paid their dues. And I said, has Gilliam County? And they said no. So I didn't know what that process was. I do participate on that.
I don't think we'd pay because we weren't participating, but if you are participating, then we need to pay our dues.
Yes, I think that is accurate. So, yeah, previously we weren't really participating. And so we felt like that wasn't a good use of money. But if you...
I don't even know. I don't know what the dues amount was. I didn't ask him. I assume they sent an invoice.
I'd have to go back and look, but I'm looking at Teresa. Was it like maybe 10, 12,000?
Yes, I think it was $12,000.
Really? Are you getting that much use out of it? Yikes.
Yes.
And it was the $1,200 to $1,500. Yowzer. What are they using that money for?
A lot of lobbying.
Okay.
Okay, so you feel it's worthwhile, Pat?
Absolutely.
Okay. Sure, are you good with that?
We're on a minimum, or on a minority, and it's helpful to have as much voice as possible, and that's what they do.
Okay. All right, well, we can get it processed then. I think we'll have to dig it out and find it. But that's that. We'll get it submitted. Okay, let's move on to announcements and next meeting. Next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, October 20th, 2021, 10 a.m. What do you got, Sherry?
I did participate for a while in the district meeting through Zoom. And then I had another commitment. That was last week. I'm glad I didn't go. Norcor had a special meeting to discuss some legal matters. And if you're interested in that, that's on the website. And that was last week. And we will have our Norcor meeting in October, as well as CAPECO. That's all I have.
What do you got?
Well, as you know, I participated in the EOAC meeting last week, and as I have been all along, and also the Eastern Oregon County Caucus call. Attended the North Gilliam County Health District meeting, and we talked about an update to the North Central Public Health Department District on the feasibility study. I'll be on the agenda next week. And I attended the AOC meeting last week also. And I guess that's about it.
Got it. For me, I had Rob Turry with PCDC reach out, and his board is wondering whether it may be time for us to schedule maybe a work session on housing. And I kind of getting the partners back around the table. I had a separate conversation with Catherine at the City of Condon, and they have some projects that they're thinking about and kind of figuring out what partners potentially could be at the table. So I'm thinking it might be a broader, originally Rob suggested it's a look at the county programs that are living at PCDC and whether we need to revamp those, but I wonder whether we need to have sort of a broader conversation about what partners are working on and in addition, how PCDC can engage with those.
Sounds good.
Does that sound workable? They had originally suggested October, but I really want to make sure we have the partners around the table. So could we aim for maybe the November 3rd? Like maybe in the afternoon, we do a work session. Is that okay on your guys' schedules?
Works for me.
Does that work for you, Pat?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
So we'll just tentatively say November 3rd, and we'll get details out once we get some things firmed up.
Okay.
The other quick updates is I attended the MCHED board meeting to talk about moving development districts. Their board is open to the discussion, which is the great news. They are going to, I think, probably appoint a work group to kind of hash out what that would look like. The big concerns that were raised were upsetting the balance between Oregon and Washington's sort of power within that board. So adding some Oregon counties, understandably, the Washington folks were worried about being left behind. So I imagine the conversations will be what, if we were to be accepted over there, what membership would look like. You know, whether we would have the same number of votes that the other counties do, or whether they would maybe dilute that a little bit. So more to come on that. I am also, our consultant, Eric, is making the rounds and talking to potential partners for fiber. So that is moving forward. I am also having a discussion this afternoon with Starlink about, for some of our outreaching homes that really, there's probably no chance we'll ever see fiber, whether we might be able to do a partnership with them to provide some service. So that's very tentative. I'm just having an initial exploratory discussion with them this afternoon.
Yeah, we have, I think we've had several families in our rural areas that have signed up for Starlink. So if we could give them any assistance, I think that would be great.
Yeah. Let me just double check that there's nothing else on my calendar that I'm missing that I wanted to note here. One second. Other than that, this is just for programming notice that the second meeting in November we already discussed is conflicts with AOC, and so we will be canceling that meeting the 17th, just as an FYI to folks who are looking ahead on the calendar. And I think that is all in terms of updates, because I already talked about Frontier Telenet earlier. Anything else for the good of the order? No. Anything from you, Pat?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, it's 10:30 and I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.